If you're losing epoxy flooring bids to cheaper guys, it's not because they're better. It's because your pricing has no rules. So when they say, can you match 3,400 on this quote, you panic and you discount. That's not a market problem. That's a workflow problem. And here's what I mean. You go out to quote a 600 square foot garage, you measure it, you talk through the options, and you send a quote for $4,200. Customer says, I got another quote for 3,400. Can you match it? And now you're in the fight. You start justifying, well, we use better materials, or, well, we've been in business longer, or our warranty is, and the customer just hears excuses, right? So you drop to 3,800 to try to meet in the middle, and you win the job, but you also lost $400 in margin, right? And worse, you actually trained that customer to negotiate just in general, but also in future jobs as well, right? Price wars themselves in the market, it's not a market problem. It's actually a workflow problem. And it's a widespread, multiple businesses in the industry or in that market actually are having a pricing problem, not a market problem. So here's what happens in real life. You walk into a job and you're already thinking about the other guy, right? You're thinking, what if they quoted lower? What if they think I'm too expensive? What if I lose this because of price? So you soften on your price. You justify, you defend before anyone even attacks, and you discount just to be safe. That's not strategy. That's actually panic in motion. And panic pricing kills profit. The real goal should be to not be the cheapest, but your goal should actually be to be the obvious choice for that customer. And that only happens whenever you control the frame with your numbers and the process to back that, not with speeches to the customers, not with justifications about why you're better, not with we're better because of this or because of that, right? With actual solid structure in throughout the entire process. Cheap competitors are not your enemy. They're actually doing you a favor. They're filtering out customers who will never pay for quality. The problem isn't that they exist. The problem is that you're making yourself comparable to the cheaper guys. When your quote is just one price with no structure, no options, no clear scope, and more importantly, no margin discipline, you look like a commodity. You stopped looking special, and now you look like just another quote, right? People can't tell you apart from the others, so they pick based on price or whatever is easiest, not because they really want you. So what are you doing to make them want you? It's a good question to ask yourself. A commodity is like plain water bottles, right? Most people are just going to grab the cheapest one. Not a commodity is your favorite sneaker brand. You'll pay more for that specific brand because you actually want that brand, right? So like I said, you looked like a commodity whenever you're giving the quotes like that. So the customer actually ends up treating you like a commodity, just like a plain water bottle, basically. And now you're in a cage match over $500. So let's talk about what's actually happening here, right? The thing is that most epoxy guys do not have a pricing strategy. They have a pricing mood. They quote based off of what they think it should be, what they charged last time. A huge red flag is what they heard a competitor is charging, right? Horrible thing to do. And what their gut tells them in the moment. That is why the market feels like a war, because without numbers, every single quote is going to feel like you're gambling. And when you gamble, you're just negotiating against yourself. So here's how it all plays out, right? The pricing mood. This is what this looks like. On Monday, you go out, you quote a garage for $4,500 and you feel good about it. On Tuesday, that customer is ghosting you, right? You try to see what was going on and you just assume it's about price. On Wednesday, you quote the next garage at $3,900 just to be safe because the last guy ghosted on you, right? At $4,500. That customer also ghosts on you though now. So now you're confused because you dropped your price and they also still ghosted you. So then Friday comes around and you quote another job at $4,200 and they say yes immediately. And now you're thinking, damn, I could have gone higher, right? This is chaos, and chaos is going to kill consistency. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Over the years of working in the epoxy industry myself, I've watched countless attempts to standardize pricing across the epoxy industry. There's different industry groups that I see trying to set like recommended rates. Facebook groups are arguing over what you should charge per square foot. Trainers try to get everyone on the same page, and it never works. And do you want to know why? Because while some guys are doing basic garage floors for $6 per square foot, other guys are doing high-end luxury metallic installs for $18 per square foot. And both of these are right, and both can win, but only if they know their numbers and they back those numbers with process, right? The guy doing $6 per square foot basic work needs volume, speed, tight labor costs, and a repeatable system. The guy doing $18 per square foot in luxury metallics needs premium branding, a very high-end portfolio, designer level sales process, and flawless execution, right? Again, neither one of them are wrong, but both will fail if they don't know their margin math and quote off of vibes instead of some kind of structure. So what do we teach instead at Never Stop? We don't tell you what to charge, but we teach you how to charge in a way that actually protects margin and controls the sales conversation. The formula is simple. You take your base materials and your base labor, whatever the amount it is in materials to do that job, and for labor, for however many days of labor it is, right? And you times that by 2, and that's your floor price, the lowest that you'll take for the job, to do the job. You also can take all of the material costs to do the job to you, the business, what it costs you, and then how much your labor costs to do that job. And you times that by 3, and that's the most that you charge. That's actually what I would suggest you start your quotes at, okay? But you set the floor based on costs, right? And you set the ceiling based on the value that your company has through your reviews, your sales process, and all of that. And you only operate between those 2 different rails. But here's the catch. That high ceiling times 3, your material costs and labor costs times 3, that ceiling only works if your brand is actually locked in, like I mentioned. You're going to need a good website, not a 2015 Wix template. You're going to need a lot of Google reviews, like upwards of 50 or more. They need to be recent reviews, and if you can get customers to submit photos, that's ideal. You also need professional photos on your website, on your social media profiles, on your Google profile, not blurry iPhone pictures. You need a sales process that actually builds value in the sale itself, not just sends estimates out to people. And you need well-crafted automations that actually nurture your clients towards a sales decision, like buying from you or not. If you don't have those things, you're not going to be able to command that really high premium pricing, not because the market won't pay it, but because you as a company, as an epoxy flooring contractor, have not earned the right to ask for that yet, okay? So here's the old way that most epoxy contractors are operating under. They give one price. There's no options that they offer. There's no scope control. There's no margin target that's set. At best, there might be a clear explanation of the process that you do, but that doesn't really give the customer much, especially because every other epoxy guy can give that clear process explanation. They know how to install the floors and they use good materials too, right? So what does a customer end up doing? They just end up comparing apples to oranges because that's all it is to them. Like they're the same thing, right? Even though you know that they're probably not the same thing. So let's say you send a quote for 600 square feet for an epoxy floor garage at $4,200, and that's it. That's all that you send, right? No breakdown, no other options for them, no higher options, no lower options, no explanation of what's included or what's excluded. And then the customer gets 2 other quotes. Quote A for 3,400, quote B for 4,800, right? And they call you and say, hey, can you beat 3,400? Because they want to work with you, but they're just seeing the price is lower, right? And now you're stuck because you've given them no frame of reference around what's happening, right? They don't know what prep level that you're including, what coating system that you're using, whether you're addressing cracks or moisture, what warranty you're offering, how many coats you're applying. All that they see is a number, right? So they do what any rational customer would do. They pick the lowest number. So let's break down these 3 quotes and see what actually happened. Your quote for the $4,200 was diamond grind prep, moisture mitigation, crack repair included, 2-coat base, 2-coat top coat, a 5-year warranty, plus you have a professional crew, and you can do the install in 2 days, right? Quote A is an acid edge prep, not diamond grind, no moisture tests. They do some cracks, but filled but not sealed, right? Just 1 coat of base coat, 1 coat top coat. no warranty. And then quote B, the most expensive quote, same scope as yours, but they presented 3 options instead. They built value during the sales process. They showed the portfolio and reviews and controlled the sales conversation, right? Let's just say hypothetically, quote A got the job because they would one, right? Not because they were better, not because the customer only cared about price, but because you didn't control the process, right? If it was just between you two, again, not let's exclude quote B that was the same scope as you, right? If it's just you and a cheaper quote, you let the customer treat all of those quotes like they were the exact same thing, right? And when everything looks the same, people are going to pick based on price. That's not a market problem. That's a framing problem, right? It's not your market's fault. It's your fault for not framing why your price was what it was and why you were the best choice to go with. Remember, our main goal is to be the best choice, not the cheapest option, right? And you can already see what's coming now too. You kind of screwed over the customer if you think about it, because they didn't save $800. They bought a cheaper system that more than likely is going to fail, which means that they'll pay again to fix and replace it while you lost the job and the extra margin that you could have charged if you had framed the value properly. And look, if you're blaming competitors all the time, I'm not mad at you. No one's mad at you. We get it. I get it. It's easier to say the market's saturated or that everyone else is racing to the bottom. But I'm telling you, the fix is your workflow, because the moment that you get disciplined with your pricing process, cheap competitors stop being relevant at all. They just become a filter. What they filter out are the customers who will never pay for quality. And that's a good thing, because those customers are going to negotiate endlessly. They're going to complain constantly. They will leave bad reviews over nothing at all. I've seen it before. And they expect champagne service on a beer budget. Do you want to deal with that, right? Let the $3,400 guys have them. Let the $5 per square foot guys have them. You want the customers who value process, quality, and outcome, right? And those customers only appear when you show up with structure. So what's the new way to do this, right? Here's the system. It's not complicated. It's just extremely structured, right? And structure is what separates 30K months from 80K months, okay? So rule number 1 is margin comes first, not last. The core principle here is that you don't price to win the job, you price to win the business, right? If your margin is not preset, you're always going to discount under pressure. So you need that margin floor rule, right? We talked about this already. Your workflow needs a hard rule. Every single quote must hit that margin floor, not under, right? No exceptions. If you set it to be 50% margin, you need to take your materials and your labor and multiply that by 2. That's 50% margin, and it can't ever go under 50% margin, right? So here's what that looks like in practice, okay? Step 1 is to calculate the cost, right? Let's say you have $800 in material for the job that you're going to do. Your labor, it comes out to $1,200. And then you allocate $400 for overhead, gas, whatever, marketing costs and all of that, right? So the total cost to do that job to you, the business owner, is $2,400. So when you set your margin floor, I would actually, let's just say that you set your minimum margin target lower than 50%. You set it at 35%, right? So that would be $2,400 divided by 0.65. And that would get you, for the cost of $2,400 in your quote, it would get you a quote that you would offer the customer of $3,692. That's a 35% margin on the cost that it cost you to do that floor for $2,400. I hope that that's making sense, right? But you also need to set your ceiling. A premium margin target could be 50% if you're using 35% as your low ceiling, or excuse me, your low floor. Then your ceiling can be at 50%. So that would look like more so $2,400 in costs time or divided by 0.50, which equals a $4,800 quote, which is the ceiling, right? So now whenever you go to this job, if you're using those numbers, the quote would be the lowest you could go is $3,692. The highest you could go is $4,800, right? Anything below $3,692, you don't take that job. Not because you're cocky, not because you're too good, but because the math doesn't work for what you've determined to be the margin that you want to be at. Now, mind you, these numbers are just an example. I have guys running at 2 times margin. So the low end is 50% of cost, 2 times cost, or 3 times cost, right? So 2 times would be the floor, and then times 3 cost would be the ceiling that they would offer, right? It depends on your branding, like we discussed earlier, if you can actually charge that ceiling or not. Or where you can charge between the floor you set and the ceiling you set, right? So most contractors, they don't even have a floor price, right? When a customer says, "Can you do it for 3,200?" you panic and say yes, and then you show up to the job and realize the materials were more expensive than you thought, the prep took longer than you thought, and they forgot to account for overhead, right? So now you're working for $15 an hour after costs, and that's not business. That's just self-employment poverty. I got to let you know that, right? So what if they say that they can't afford it? Super simple. If the customer can't afford your floor, you don't destroy your business to save the sale, right? You say, "Hey, I totally understand. Based on what you're describing, my cost to do this properly is locked in. I can't really go any lower without cutting any corners, and I don't operate that way. If budget is the main thing, I'd recommend waiting until you can do it right, or I can refer you to someone who might be able to do work that's within your range." And then you just move on, right? Because one bad job at thin margin will cost you more in stress, time, and reputation than walking away ever will. If you walk away with nothing else from this video that you're watching right now, at least walk away with that, right? Walking away from a job will never cost you the same amount of time, stress, or reputation as one bad job at an already thin margin will cost you, okay? That's just a super big point there. Rule number 2 is that you need a quote with a calculator, not vibes. Your quote should be produced with inputs, not emotions. So your pricing calculator should include stuff like your square footage, your prep level, like what level of prep you're going to do, what kind of coating system you're going to do. Some materials cost more than others. Additional scope like stem walls and what that costs you to do. Constraints like travel distance, schedule urgency, if you charge a rush fee or not. And then also your warranty level. Are you doing a 3-year standard warranty, 5-year premium warranty, 10-year luxury warranty with like a maintenance plan attached to it? So why do these things work, right? When you price like this, you can actually explain your pricing cleanly without sounding defensive. The customer says, "Why is it 4,800 when the other guy quoted 3,400?" You say, "Hey, great question. Let me show you what's included in my numbers, and you can compare it to their quote." And then you walk through, the diamond grind versus the acid etch, the 4-coat system versus the 2-coat system, the crack sealing versus the crack filling, right? The 5-year warranty versus no warranty, the 2-day install versus the 1-day rush install, right? Now you're not charging more. You're actually quoting a defined system that you install, and the customer can make an informed decision instead of a price-based guess about what is best for them, right? So rule number 3 is to give them structured options so that way you can control the frame. One price for one service, like quoting them at $7 per square foot for flake when that's all that they asked. It invites comparison, and options actually allow you to kind of create control, right? So here's how you structure the options. Option 1 is going to be good, or like a functional system, right? You got the diamond grind in there, just a solid color epoxy base, clear top coat, 3-year warranty, price is $3,800, right? Then another option is the diamond grind, crack sealing. You do flake instead of just the solid color. And obviously the customer can choose. And then let's say you do a poly top coat, you do a 5-year warranty, and that comes out to 4,600. And then the best option, which would be like the premium system with full coverage, right? Diamond grind with moisture mitigation services, a metallic epoxy designer finish, stem walls included, a 10-year warranty plus annual maintenance check, and you quote that at 6,200, right? So what does this do psychologically to the customer? Now the customer isn't comparing you to another contractor. They're comparing options inside of your process, right? So here's the magic too. 20% of customers that you quote are just going to pick good because they just want something that's functional and budget conscious, right? Think about the quotes that you've gone to. 60% are going to pick better. This feels like the smart choice. Like they don't want the metallic finish, but they don't want something that's just functional. They want something that looks nice, a really nice flake blend. But 20% of these customers that you're quoting are going to pick best. They want that premium and they can afford it, right? But here's the key. Even the customers who pick good, they are still paying your margin floor. They're paying at least 50% margin or more. And so you always kind of know where you're at, right? You didn't need to discount. You didn't have to negotiate. You just structured the choice for them, right? And that's how premium gets chosen without you ever even having to defend the price. People are just going to choose premium sometimes. You might even go out for a flake quote, and if you show them the metallic option, they might actually pick that, right? So let's say that you're on site with a customer and you actually walk the garage and you've asked the qualifying questions and you've built rapport with the customer, right? And now you sit down with them to run the numbers and you say, okay, hey, based on what you're looking for, I've got 3 options for you, right? Option 1 is our good system. It's a solid color. It's a functional floor. It'll last 5+ years with normal use. It's straightforward. It's durable and it gets the job done. That's $3,800. Option 2 is our better system. This is what most of my customers go with. It includes the flake broadcast for a more custom look, a tougher top coat that cures faster, and a 5-year warranty on that one. That's $4,600, right? And option 3 is our best system. This is for someone who wants a showroom quality metallic finish for full moisture protection and a 10-year warranty with maintenance included, right? That's $6,200. And then you just pause. You say all 3 of these are solid. It just depends on what outcome you're going for. Which one are you leaning towards, right? And so why does this work? You didn't ask, can you afford $4,800? You didn't say, most people just pick the middle one. You presented the 3 clear paths and then you let them self-select, right? And here's what happened. Like I said, 70% of your customers are either going to pick better or best. Not because you manipulated them, but because you structured the decision in a way that made sense for them to know. Like, I don't want just a solid color. Like, I see that's the lower one, right? And I will say, a lot of guys offer stuff like, solid color, flake, and metallics in the setup that I work with, but it just depends on what you offer. So you'll have to play around with this, right? And this is why cheap competitors don't scare serious contractors, because serious contractors know their margin, they control the scope, they control the sales process, and they enforce a quoting workflow. That's how you get paid for quality instead of punished for it, right? And here's the truth with all of this. If you're losing every single job to price, it's not because the market is broken. It's not because of cheap competitors. It's because your process is broken and you need to take responsibility for it, right? You're just quoting off of vibes. You're just presenting one option. You're defending price instead of controlling the sales process, and you're discounting before they even object to the price at all, right? If you fix those 4 things, those price wars will disappear for you, right? So you can run a quick audit on everything just to see where you're at and answer these quick questions right now, right? Do you have a minimum margin floor? Not around 30%, like an exact number. Do you quote from a calculator or just from memory? If it's from memory, you're guessing, right? Do you present options or just one number for one service, the service that they requested? If it's just one number, you're running into a comparison trap, and it's going to be a lot harder to close at that point too, unless you're really good at what you're doing. Do you have scope standards, or do you just kind of freestyle every job, right? Freestyling is going to kill your consistency. And do you discount before they even object? Are you lowering the prices before you've ever found out if price is even an option, right? Like, oh, I could probably come down a little bit. That's self-sabotage. You're just hurting yourself, and you're making yourself look not as professional, to be honest, as well. So that just hurts you even more. And can you explain your pricing in 60 seconds without sounding defensive? If no, you don't have clarity yet. If you're unclear on any of these, those price wars with cheaper competitors are going to feel very real for you because you've made yourself comparable. If you do nothing else, do this one thing. Tomorrow morning, set a margin floor, set the lowest price that you're willing to take. Again, I suggest your material cost, your labor cost, multiply that by 2, and don't go under that number. You need to charge more than that, or, up to that, right? So set that margin floor and then enforce it on your next quote, right? That one rule will change your business. And why is that? Because it actually forces you to sell properly instead of negotiating against yourself. When you know that you can't go below that 50% margin, but let's say 3,800, you stop softening your pitch to your customers. You stop saying, I can probably work with you on price. And you start saying, here's what's included. Here are the options. Let me know what makes sense for you, right? And that confidence that you have when you're giving those options, that's what closes deals. And if you're doing 20K to 30K a month, you already have leads coming in and you want this built into your quoting workflow. So that way you can stop discounting and you can start controlling the frame and the sales process. Book a call with me at neverstopagency.com and I'd be more than happy to help you get everything moving the right direction.